Hey everyone, you've got Vaughn and Casey. We're coming to you with a security flash. This one is about CVE 2025-0311. It's a really interesting bug with some interesting kind of circumstances around its discovery and kind of how we've seen it blow up on the queue over the past week or so. So Vaughn and I figured we'd jump on and have a bit of a chat about it. So yeah, Vaughn, what's going on?
Yeah, so there's a CVE that dropped around May that was reported by, as many of you may know, organization called Expo. So it's a vulnerability in a VPN appliance by Palo Alto. It
Yep.
allows pretty much third-party contractors to connect to your application and networks. And essentially, it's clientless. So that's the big kind of vulnerability with this, is it allows people to not download a client, send a GET request, and access your applications. So yeah, this ended up being a pretty big vulnerability because it's relatively simple to exploit, right?
So
Uh,
how would you go about exploiting it? Like what does that look like?
yeah, in terms of exploiting this, all it takes is a very simple GET request. And luckily, there's a nuclei template out now that allows you to just really easily run this against your applications. So those of you that want to patch this right away, you can leverage that template to fire off your app against your applications, and you're able to detect it with pretty minor configuration. It's actually a relatively simple payload to fire off.
Right.
So as long as you append it to your host name, you should be able to get a call back, and usually it's an alert box. So
But it sounds like the thing that's unique about this is an attack surface. Like we talk about a VPN client, it's not like a complex kind of binary attack on an endpoint. It's really more a matter of tricking a user to click on a link that's had its like URL fiddled with. Is that about
ex
right?
exactly.
Okay.
Again, this application was made for contractors, so people that are outside your organization that can connect to it really easily. So they had to make it easy. And in that aspect, it's either a GET request, post request that they send to get access, and all it takes is that to access any internal application.
Okay, cool. So you talked about Expo being the discoverer and it being a nuclei template. Like we've seen this this kind of blow up over the past week or so on the Bugcrowd queue. It's clearly, a vulnerability that exists in a lot of places and something that people are now having a fairly easy time finding and exploiting. Can you
Yeah,
just talk a bit more about that?
yeah, the blast radius is relatively large, and it's a really interesting time in bug bounty because you have some solutions that allow you to do recon by the press of a button, allows you to send certain payloads with a click of a button. And in this case, you have the diaspora of those types of applications on top of autonomous research and AI and LLMs to find kind of footholds like this. And you combine the two together, it leads to just everything kind of raining down, especially on the queue. So we're super happy to hear it, but at the end of the day, we really want our
Yeah,
customers to fix it. Yeah.
it's interesting. It's one of those things where like the ability for, the kind of good faith security researchers and hackers that we work with that are doing bad things for good reasons, like the availability of templates like this is super good for them. It also, I guess, in some ways puts it in the hands of the bad guys as well. There used to be a concept, and there still is, called HD Moore's law, which is basically, the number of like adversaries that you could expect to see exploiting a particular vulnerability is kind of directly correlated to its availability in Metasploit. And it sounds like Nuclei is kind of the new version of that in some ways. Would that be about right?
Yeah, definitely. At least on the application layer of things, right? Um, but yeah, I mean, I think what it does is it commoditizes the simple type of vulnerability to look for. If everybody's at the race to get it, like it's usually the first person that can get it, right? So while this kind of pool of vulnerabilities kind of start kind of disappearing over time, it's really important as a call out of like security researchers to do deeper research, because the people that really do benefit from these things is the people that are doing the research, really cool stuff, right? So it's more like a call to action. Like let's do pretty interesting research. Let's deep dive into tools to make the world a safer place.
Dig in harder. Yeah. And can you talk a little bit more about Expo's role in this? Because, the fact that they're a kind of an AI powered, web security research platform, really, and the fact that they've found this, they've been, creeping up on different leaderboards and going out there and finding all these things now. They're putting their name to this kind of new vulnerability. Do you want to go into that a little bit more? Because we talked about the nuclei side, but then there's the AI side of this as well, right?
Yeah, it's still pretty unclear on, what Expo was exactly able to do to get to this. I hope they do kind of expose it to the rest of us so we can kind of elevate research that way.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, like just looking at their applications and what's out there, like it's a really interesting approach to doing security research because at the end of the day, you have LLMs, you have AI, you can proxy work to these things to be able to do certain things for you, whether it's reading specifications, whether it's
Yeah,
reading a
no, for
bunch of
sure.
books, and you have a third brain. Like I remember when, ChatGPT first came out, people were thinking about it like, oh, just think about like a really smart intern, like root next to you, able to do everything. What happens if you have 30 of them just looking through documentation every single day or looking through Linux kernels and reading the
Yeah.
code? So I think it
Or,
makes me
or
excited.
30 of them with perfect memory and the ability to access like, the entire kind of historical public corpus of data to inform, the next steps of VR. It's definitely an interesting time on that side. Yeah, and to see vulnerabilities like this, ostensibly getting generated kind of independently by these sort of platforms, it's a cool kind of evolution of that side of things. Like this bug to me doesn't feel that complicated in the sense that like it's essentially just fiddling with a
Correct.
URL and popping XSS. Both of those things from a programmatic standpoint are pretty easy to automate and all that other stuff. But the way that they've gotten to that conclusion and gone after this particular target, like that part feels quite novel.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Yeah.
the discovery, right? And whether they just taught their tool how to use all these other tools and taught it to essentially think like a hacker. I assume that, they got access to the application and they told it what it's all about and just look through the application
Let it
and
loose
see what
and
you can
yeah,
find.
yeah,
Yeah, and let us know because at the end of the day, it's still going to require a human to parse through the results. Maybe one day it's fully AGI, but I'm sure there's a lot of really
we're
smart
not there
people.
yet. And I'm sure we'll
Yeah,
have
that really put it
generated more
together.
code by the time that rolls around. So that's a fun kind of cat and mouse game on that side.
Yeah.
So I guess like bringing it back to kind of practical pieces, for folk on the crowd side of things, thinking about this particular vulnerability, obviously this is, discoverable right now. There's a lot of people going after that. Like actually discovering it is not necessarily that useful at this point in time, but given the fact that like where there's smoke, there's often fire. How would you be thinking about this as a bug hunter?
As a bug hunter, it would honestly change my thinking of using LLMs and AI tools. I
Hmm.
think some people use it all differently. Like I could give it to myself and use it in a different way than someone else can. So it's really about figuring out how I could leverage this into my flow so I'm able to be a better bug hunter. Like,
Right.
what are my flaws as a bug hunter? How can this tool help me kind of evolve from that? It's kind of like it's like an ion cannon, right? You want to point out something to DOS something, and I'm just going to use this tool to do what I want it to do, right? And do
Yeah.
what I can to make me want it to do.
Yeah, so
So
AI is a tool in terms of like decreasing time to success on the security research side, like how to integrate that. I guess where I was going partly with that question is like looking for this particular vulnerability, um, maybe not as productive, but the whole idea of taking the lessons learned from how this vulnerability was found and then how that was scaled out. So AI for the discovery, nuclei for the scaled detection.
exactly.
Trying to incorporate those ideas into your workflow as a hunter might be a good idea to start thinking about that if you're not already. And lots of people are, but it's one of those ones where it's like this is a kind of an in the wild demonstration of that happening at scale, right?
Certainly. And it's an evolution of recon in a way. Instead of just looking for endpoints, finding unique kind of keywords that you can use, finding old historical like archives of certain things, it's teaching something about to just go into a tool and get you information that signal that you can use as a hunter to find more vulnerabilities.
Yep.
And as many of you have seen, finding something like this is pretty valuable. So the amount of time to
Yeah.
effort, it's
Yep.
probably worth doing deeper security
Yeah.
research, isn't it?
ROI. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, like these two tools or these two approaches to tooling, just as a general way to improve your return on investment as a hunter, um, kind of reducing it to an economics problem to solve like that, and thinking about that, that's something that we've talked about for a long time with various evolutions of tooling that have come out, and this, is a really good example of the next step of that. I think the thing to call out for the defenders as well is that's how the bad guys are doing it, right? Like they're ultimately running businesses, like whether they're a nation state, a cyber criminal actor, or even
Exactly.
like a chaotic actor. they're still thinking about it in terms of what's the return that they can get on their investment for whatever definition of return they have. So whenever they're getting access to tooling like this, they're kind of using it in the same way. And you could argue they're probably using it ahead of us most of the time.
Exactly.
So yeah,
Right. And
cool.
they're
So
gonna
go ahead.
Yeah, and they're gonna find the tool that everybody's using, right? What's everyone using? What am I scanning the internet on Shodan? What's being the most used? Take that information, just focus the security research there. Right.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting to look at this vuln in retrospect and see where it may have popped up in the past before we kind of started talking about it, when the trash fire kind of happens, right? Like the whole
Right.
idea of like, you got a pine forest that hasn't been tended to that well, and you got like flammable stuff burning, sort of building up on the ground. Like at some point that gets lit up and we all start talking about it because it's obvious. But
Right.
that build up, I think, is something that's interesting to look into as well. So we should check that out. Going back to the defender piece, like just very practically with this bug, CVE 2025-0311, what should I be doing if I am a CISO or a network defender? And I think I've got this on my network, or I'm not sure.
I would I would find a way to scan your networks to see if it's using this. Ask every single security person that you have on your team, go down the ladder. And mind you, this is the application for contractors. So this is probably an application that's quite easy to miss, right?
Right. Yeah.
So it's something that we would recommend to fix right away because the biggest thing about this is PAN-OS, the Global Protect application with client-less VPN being enabled. Same origin policy is ignored. So any application that's using this to contact other computers, mobile phones, and so on, if they click on a phishing link, they get access to everything behind that.
Okay.
Every
Wow.
every piece of traffic. So this is something that we would recommend to fix right away, and to update. It's a simple update. So we behoove you to update it.
Yeah, and like that update needs to happen on the Palo Alto firewall. Is that right? Is that kind of where
Correct.
it's hosted and it goes out from there? Okay.
Correct.
So
Or to disable your clientless VPN on your Palo Alto
yeah. So
firewall.
ostensibly, most organizations are going to know whether or not they've got that type of firewall. They'll have at least some idea of where it is. There might be things missing from that second list, and
Correct.
then the big question becomes: do I have this particular vulnerable feature turned on or not, and do I have it patched or not? Is that
Exactly.
is that about right? Okay, got it.
Yeah. And it depends how many firewalls you have, right? Like maybe this
Yeah,
is like
that's
the first layer. And like when it hits the second layer, it might not be vulnerable to you, but it's still worth investigating on what this firewall is actually touching. So,
excellent. And we were talking ahead of this, given the fact that it is same origin, you do get a lot of access from basically like URL injected XSS. Probably two things there. One is that XSS is like often kind of seen as this pedestrian, benign, just annoying vulnerability. I think this is a really good illustration of the fact that no, you can actually get stuff done with it in the right circumstances. Oftentimes, it is just kind of a thing that should be fixed and isn't really that big a deal from a risk standpoint. But there are circumstances like this one where it does have a material impact. I think the other part that you mentioned was that this is actually a really good opportunity to kind of double down on awareness from like a
yep,
phishing standpoint, right?
exactly. It's a perfect time to do security awareness training. I'll tell you what, because I mean, what's the most exploited thing in security awareness training is probably some sort of XSS.
Yeah.
This is a perfect vector for that. This is the perfect vulnerability to be able to get into your organization from a click of a link.
So it's a good
So
demo. So don't click
exactly.
links ever. Just stay off the internet, full stop. No. Teaching users on how to identify the behaviors that could lead up to that and laws and all those different things, and actually using this as a demonstration of what can go wrong if you fail at that. I think, yeah, I completely agree. This is good
Right.
fodder for that conversation.
Yeah. And as a defender, it's a great opportunity to just even make like a mini vulnerable app to show how vulnerable this could possibly be on your organization. It's worth the research. Why not? If someone's doing this research, why not kind of add to it?
Yeah.
Right.
What do you think this sort of implies about where we're going from a exploitation standpoint, I guess, on the defender side, but thinking about it potentially as security researchers as well.
Yeah. It's we want this type of research to obviously just be used by the good guys, right? But the
Yep.
bad guys is probably what's going to keep a lot of CISOs up at night, especially the ones that are crafting a bot at of just a bunch of bots with LLMs attached to them and reading every single thing and just hitting your applications 24/7. So it's a very scary realization that security research, even if it's superficial, like an XSS via GET request, they were still able to find that.
Yeah.
Mind you, I think like a couple months ago, there was someone that discovered something in a Linux kernel by just sending multiple things to, O3. So this is very real. I think this is a reality check for bug bounty platforms in general to kind of see that this is happening, and organizations and CISOs to really pay attention to. You're having bots do research on your application 24/7 without sleep all the time. And it's whoever has the most compute and energy that's able to do that, to really just push the button and go.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think probably the way I'd frame that is that the cost, like the amount of like investment that has to go into reaching the point of return, is decreasing, and it's spreading out at the same time. So the amount of effort that goes into finally getting shell or getting to, whatever outcome you're looking for. The O3 work in the Linux kernel is a good example of that, because O3 didn't find the bug. It I think only fired on 7 or 8 out of 100
Like
tries.
100.
But what it did do was to give the security researcher the context they needed to complete the chain. So it like sped up their time to success. So there's that. But then on the other side of it, you've got these tools kind of in the hands of a much broader variety of people, than maybe we saw in the past, right?
Right. And this is the minor glimpse to maybe an AGI moment, right? Like if it's aligned and like it just runs and it just works and it just gives us real value, like just like finding all XSS on an application, doing active research on it, then it's just a matter of time.
Yeah, so I think about it because this is an interesting one. There's been I've seen kind of on LinkedIn over the past little while a bunch of kind of conversations around the first like agent-driven or AI-driven broad-scale internet attack. And it's funny because whenever I read that, I think, well, when you look at what, Salt and Volt Typhoon were able to pull off, and then you look at how Flax Typhoon's being maintained, and then you consider access to DeepSeek kind of as a part of, similar apparatus on the back end, right? Like there's no way that AI didn't help make those things happen. Like
Right.
was it autonomously in control of that outcome? We'll never know. It probably
We'll never
wasn't.
know.
But yeah, I would pretty happily bet London to a house brick that at least at some point in that process, like AI was used to help solve a particular part of that outcome for the attackers on that side.
Definitely. And being in cybersecurity ourselves, right? It's always the defenders are always going to have to work more, right? The crowd is always going to have to work more to beat the bad guys, to out research them. So
Hmm.
let's, like at Bugcrowd, we're always about one crowd. Like let's fight
Yeah.
against this, right? Let's
Yeah,
do the best
and
that we
and
can.
and do that by understanding the techniques, the tactics, the procedures, the things that are making them more effective, and then trying to work out how we can incorporate that. We're doing that obviously at the platform level, but I think it's not just us in the middle. It's for everyone in the security research community to really like lean into thinking about this type of thing and figuring out how it's going to make them more effective.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what do you think about, like the autonomous risk, right? Like that you kind of touched on that before, but this whole idea of like AI driven systems going completely off piste and hacking the entire planet or whatever that might
Hack
look
the
like.
planet,
Yeah.
literally. um, it's it's definitely some. I'm not a CISO myself, but it's definitely something that would keep me up at
Mm,
night. So it's frightening in a way, right? I
mm,
just know that these systems are going to get much better, and that's the fear in all this.
mm.
So the amount of innovation and the amount of quality of output that we're getting from these LLMs have increased so much in like the last year.
Yeah.
Like you would look at just like the Will Smith eating spaghetti, right? And like a year ago, and it just didn't look real. But nowadays, like the uncanny valley is not really there anymore. Like it's kind of hard to tell.
Mm,
So I see that applied to autonomous tools that attackers can build, that researchers can build. And it's all about just having a bigger crowd and a much smarter crowd to be able to fight against that. So,
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think I fully agree with that. I think part of what concerns me with the reality of that going forward and how kind of accessible it is even now, if not kind of evenly distributed, right? Um, is how vulnerable things are. Like the fact that, you can go out and find vulnerabilities like the one we just talked about. Like it's a fairly pedestrian issue in a fairly widely kind of used piece of software that has a lot of access attached to it and is implemented in a way that allows that access if you can exploit that vulnerability. Like this is, we're hearing about, you know, a dozen or more of these a week at this point in time. So the idea of being able to take advantage of that, even as end day, as an attacker, yeah,
yeah,
it's interesting. Like the ability to scale an attack like that, and like the combination of that, and the fact that there's just a lot that's vulnerable out there. That to me, it's actually that pairing that kind of freaks me out a little bit.
right. And you have this like diaspora vibe coding, right? So how many organizations
Yeah, then
are
we're
are,
adding
are
new stuff on top. Yep, 100%.
yeah. So yeah, so things are just gonna get more vulnerable. I mean, as a hunter, it's gonna be great. As a customer, it will train your security teams
Yeah,
in a great way, right?
yeah. I think to me, like like the takeaway with that, because it's not like a doom and gloom, and everything's screwed, let's just go shopping kind of conversation. I
Of
think to
course not.
me, like what it really does force is a pretty like ruthless conversation around prioritization when it comes to fix on the defender side, right? Because the previous assumptions that have been applied have been that like if it's below this kind of level of impact, based on the attackers that I expect, the industry I'm in, whatever else it might be, I can create a cut line, and anything below that, I don't really need to worry about as much.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, that's a really
whereas,
good point.
whereas what, AI has done, and will continue to do is to basically like lower that cut line. So
Exactly.
like the ease of exploitation for vulnerabilities on that spectrum is going to decrease or
It
increase
shrunk.
rather, but
Yeah,
also the kind of attackers you can expect is going to increase because it's easier for them as well.
yeah,
You don't have gating for access to
exactly.
vulnerabilities in that same way.
Like there will be more exploitation, but what like the essentially like the path to full high impact exploitation is heavily reduced, right? Because
Yeah.
you can just, hey, I found foothold in this. I'm just going to tell bot one to do research on that, get me something in the morning, right? And
Yep.
hopefully it finds me something and just
So,
equipped it with the right tools.
so really,
So
it does come back to this idea of having your discovery, remediation or mitigation, and then kind of cleanup pipelines like dialed in, and expecting kind of more work for them over the next period, I guess.
yeah, and the only bandwidth is electricity and compute. So as long as you have enough of that, you're
Once and sleep, right?
yeah, and sleep, of course.
Very cool. All right. Well, thanks, Vaughn. It's been good to jam on this stuff because I know we've been talking about it for a while, in all sorts of different directions. It is really kind of cool and novel in some ways. At the same time, it is a little kind of frightening to see evidence of these methods working really kind of in the wild, which is what this
Right.
is. It's not a lab thing. It's like, cool, AI found the thing, nuclear AI replicated it. A whole bunch of people went out and just machine gunned the internet, and it's everywhere, as it turns out. Like,
Mhm.
it's not really a surprise that that's the outcome, but to actually see it play out like that is pretty neat.
Right. And I'm sure it's very humbling for you because I mean bug bounty's changing. It's
Oh
it's
yeah,
it's evolving, right? And it's I'm sure it's very humbling for you to be part of this because you've been here for almost like more than a decade, right? To work on this. And essentially it's like you're seeing your baby grow up into some type of kind of like scary machine.
I think it always was a scary machine. It's just a scary machine that goes a lot faster now.
Yeah.
Because we've seen this like I think we've seen this in a Bugcrowd context before with probably the best example I can think of is attack surface management. Like, bounty hunters were doing that stuff by hand
Right.
prior to the arrival of ASM tooling, and then that kind of led to the EASM market. Um, and all of a sudden, the whole thing just got faster, right? So, like, it didn't remove the creative process from it, but it made a particular aspect of what they were trying to get done a lot more
Much
accessible and a lot
quicker.
more, continuous in its nature. Like I saw that with Metasploit when it first dropped. Prior to that, it was all exploit coding by hand and trying to
Shell
remember,
coding.
yeah, trying to remember how to do the things every time you did the thing. All of a sudden, HD drops Metasploit, and you've got this like step function improvement in accessibility and efficiency.
Right.
Um, to me, in some ways, like it's definitely humbling because this is to me a lot more dramatic a shift than either of those were.
Mm,
Um, but in other ways, it's kind of a similar thing. It's just on a broader scale, and
mm,
with tooling that makes it a lot more accessible. So yeah, it's very cool to see, the relationship between human and machine and all this stuff.
mm,
It is going to get like the humans plus machines on the attacker side and the humans plus machines on the defender side. I think that kind of OODA loop is just going to narrow.
right.
That's where, we're going to have to put some serious thought as an internet on what we do about that into the future.
Right.
Yeah,
It's a higher stake cat and mouse game now. So
indeed, indeed. All right, let's wrap it there. Appreciate your time, man.